In this video, we're going to take a look at top and tail editing within the waveform editor. What this actually means is we take an audio file and we select a portion at the start that we don't need, and we select a portion at the end that we don't need, and we usually want to keep the contents within the middle of that file. So that means that you're getting rid of the top of the file and you're getting rid of the tail of the file. We've got two interview clips that we're going to use for this top and tail editing. I'm just going to play back the actual project that we're going to create in today's session. Now, as you can see, we've kind of jumped over to the multi-track session for the time being, and don't worry, I'm not expecting you to be at this point. I'm just giving you a sneak preview into what's coming up a little bit later on. And I'm going to play back the results of the whole project just now. And to give this a little bit of context, this project was completed by one of our students a while ago now. It's focusing around footballers, particularly in lower leagues, working through the summer transfer window. And for those lower league footballers, it's a matter of livelihood whether or not they get a new contract with a new club. So this is discussing financial fair play and help that lower league footballers can get hold of. So let's take a listen.
This time of year, help is exactly what hundreds of football players released by clubs up and down the country need in finding a new home. With the recent introduction of the financial fair play in the Football League, finding a club has become more and more difficult. Charlie McDonald, recently released by Oldham Athletic, explains just how difficult his current situation is.
Yeah, it's very worrying, obviously being a 33-year-old with a family to support, having no income or no job offers at the moment. It is pretty worrying. I suppose if you're 19, 20 years old and got no responsibilities, then you can sort of fend for yourself. But where you have a lot more responsibility and you've got bills to pay, yeah, the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to sort of understand.
For those players unable to find a club, the realisation of a new career can be a daunting prospect, but help is at hand. The Professional Footballers Association offer a wide range of opportunities. Osher Williams, Assistant Director of Education at the PFA, explains exactly what they offer.
The first thing that we try to provide is information, advice and guidance. Importantly, we do offer financial support in the form of grants and bursaries for those that want to retrain, progress onto higher education or develop existing skills, whether they be across undergraduate study, across coaching, or even in vocational areas of development.
Whether it's assistance from an agent or calling on the PFA for support, as long as the individual football player is proactive and plans ahead, they will be okay. All they need is a little help from their friends.
Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of insight into what we're going to be creating for the remainder of today's session. Moving back to the main waveform editor workspace then, I'd like you to double click on the Charlie McDonald clip, which is in the files panel. So find Charlie McDonald and double click to reveal his waveform. Now, Charlie's clip is 42 seconds long, almost 43 seconds long. And like I've said before, we want to top and tail this clip. We want to get rid of the audio at the start of the file that we don't need, and also any audio at the end of the file that we don't need. So let's just take a quick listen to this clip in its entirety.
Hello, testing. Charlie McDonald, recently released by Oldham Athletic, explains how worrying his current situation is.
Yeah, it's very worrying, obviously being a 33-year-old with a family to support, having no income or no job offers at the moment. It is pretty worrying. I suppose if you're 19, 20 years old and got no responsibilities, then you can sort of fend for yourself. But where you have a lot more responsibility and you've got bills to pay, yeah, the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to sort of understand.
Boom. Cheers, mate.
One take, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, so there is Charlie being interviewed by one of our students. And of those of you with an eagle eye, you will have noticed that the clip indicator has indeed illuminated in this case. And we can kind of see that was going to be an issue around this area anyway, because the waveform does seem to go off the scale above 0 decibels full scale. So that's something that we need to be aware of. However, if we just take a listen to this section, we can see that this isn't part of the clip that we want to keep. So let's take a listen once more.
Charlie McDonald, recently released by Oldham Athletic, explains how worrying his current situation is.
Yeah, it's very worrying.
So it's at the point where Charlie says, yeah, it's very worrying that we actually want to start our soundbite. So somewhere in this region is where the soundbite begins. Now we're going to identify the precise start time of our soundbite just now by using something called markers. So what I'd like you to do is use the global navigator to zoom in at the point somewhere between 10 and 12 seconds where Charlie's soundbite begins, and it's at this point here where he says, yeah, it's very worrying.
Yeah, it's very worrying, obviously being a 33-year-old.
So that is the start of the soundbite. Now I'd like you to left click at the very beginning of that soundbite, and if you want to, you can scrub through as well to make sure that you're not actually halfway through one of Charlie's words. So somewhere about there is good, and that's where we're going to indicate the start of the selection, and we'll do that by pressing the letter M for marker on the keyboard. So right now I'm going to press the letter M, and when I do that, you can now see above the playhead, just below the global navigator, we've got a new marker that's been created. Now we're just going to leave that there for the time being. That's just going to indicate to us the start of the soundbite. And next, what we're going to do is find the end of the soundbite. So that's going to be somewhere over here, around 35 seconds. So let's play a few seconds up to 35 seconds. Let's drop the playhead and press spacebar.
Yeah, the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to sort of understand.
So there it is, after where he says to sort of understand. Let's use the global navigator once more, and let's play those last few seconds.
Difficult it is to sort of understand.
So at that point is where we want to add a second marker, which will identify the end of our soundbite, or the end of the selection that we want. Now we can use the scrub tool once more.
To sort of understand.
And at this point, this is where we get a bit of microphone handling noise. So let's drop the playhead somewhere about there. And then once we're happy with that playhead position, let's press the letter M once more on the keyboard for the word marker. And then we've got our second marker, which has been created in that place. So now if we zoom out using the zoom out full button, you can see if we move the playhead that we've got two markers, one just here to indicate the start of the selection and one at the end. Now what we need to do is select all of the content or all of the audio between those two markers. And what you'll notice when we hover over or glide over that particular marker just to the left, you'll notice if I zoom in on my screen that when we get close to that marker, Audition snaps like a magnet to that particular marker, which is really good because it's kind of identifying that we've precisely hit that marked area with our selection, so we know that the selection is exactly where we want it to be. And if you remember earlier, we can edit our selection, so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to click and drag outwards towards the second marker, and now you can see, because it's snapped onto the marker, the selection that we have is the soundbite that we need. And everything outside of that selection is the content that we want to remove. Now, if we play back at the moment, we're not actually going to hear the content that we want to keep, and the reason being is because we still have skip selection turned on from the previous exercise. So if you can, please turn off skip selection, and then when you're ready, we can play back our selection, which is going to be Charlie's soundbite. As you can see, the playhead is at the start of the selection automatically, so when we click on play, we will hear our soundbite that we want to keep.
Yeah, it's very worrying, obviously being a 33-year-old with a family to support, having no income or no job offers at the moment, it is pretty worrying. I suppose if you're 19, 20 years old and got no responsibilities, then you can sort of fend for yourself. But where you have a lot more responsibility and you've got bills to pay, yeah, the longer it goes on, the more difficult it is to sort of understand.
Okay, I'm happy with that selection. That is the soundbite that I'd like to use. So in this case, we don't want to be pressing backspace on the keyboard because that will just leave us with the content that we want to remove. So we need to do the opposite of that. We need to remove everything outside of the selection. And the tool that we can use to do that is called the crop tool. And just like cut, copy and paste, we can access the crop tool from the edit menu or by right-clicking on the selection itself. So if we right-click, just over halfway down we've got the option to crop, or we've got Command-T as the keyboard shortcut, or Control-T on Windows. And like before, we can go to the edit menu, halfway down we've got the option to crop. So if we choose that option now, you'll notice that all of the audio outside of the selection has now disappeared, leaving us just with the contents of the soundbite that we'd like. And that is what you call a top and tail edit. Now in some instances of radio, that might be as technical as you need to get with a particular audio file. You just need to remove some content at the start and some content at the end, and it doesn't get any more complicated than that. However, for today's session we are working with a multi-track project. We are going to create a radio package which consists of some music, sound effects and so on, so we're going to take it a slight step further. But for the meantime, let's look at another example of top and tail editing using the clip called Osher Williams. So let's go over to Osher, and his soundbite in the original mix that we played for you was about 30 seconds long, but in this case Osher's clip is actually 3 minutes long. Now, I'm not expecting you to listen to the whole clip, and I'm certainly not going to play back the 3 minutes in this tutorial. So instead what I'm going to do is give you some timings to look for so we can successfully edit this clip together. Now the first timing is going to be around 30 seconds. This is going to be the start of the soundbite. So I would recommend once more that we zoom in to around 30 seconds. Now what you'll notice about Osher's clip is that it's actually pretty quiet, so we need to address that a little bit later on. We're going to deal with the raw audio at its original volume for the time being, but if you need to boost your headphones volume, then you can do that now. But we're going to stick with the original signal strength in the clip for the time being. Let's take a listen to around 30 seconds.
Every season find themselves out of contract, potentially maybe out of the game if depending on the circumstances. The first thing that we try to provide is information, advice and guidance.
So we're going to start Osher's soundbite with the phrase, the first thing that we try to provide, which is pretty much at 30 seconds. So let's play that once more.
The first thing that we try to provide is
Yeah, so there is the start of the soundbite. Now again, we need to really zoom in on this area so we can find where the start is, and we can scrub through once more. So it's just there. So we've got this word, hesitation.
The first thing that we
So we want our playhead to be somewhere just there. Let's zoom in even further so we can make sure that we've got the exact point that we need. So let's scrub through. So it's just there. So just like Charlie's clip, we're going to add a marker, and the marker will identify the start of our soundbite. So let's press the letter M on the keyboard. So there we've identified the start of the soundbite. Let's zoom back out then using the zoom out full button or your plus and minus keys on the keyboard. And let's find the end of the soundbite. And the end of the soundbite is going to be around 1 minute and 35 seconds. So let's play it through.
Graduate study across coaching, or even in vocational areas of development.
So we're going to go up to where Osher says vocational areas of development. Again, we need to zoom in using the global navigator because we can't clearly see the shape of this waveform. So let's play it through again.
Across coaching, or even in vocational areas of development.
And just before he takes that breath in after the word development, we're going to drop our playhead. So let's listen to that phrase again.
Of development.
Okay, so that's where we want the second marker. I'm going to add my second marker just now. There it is. Let's zoom out full, and again we've got our two markers. So we want to make the selection of everything in between those two markers. And if you need to, just zoom in so you can clearly see that you have indeed snapped the selection to those markers number 1 and 2. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Feel free to listen to the whole soundbite if you wish, but we are going to edit it further, so there's no point in listening to it just yet. But what I'd like you to do first is crop the audio out, so we're doing another top and tail edit. So right click on the selection and go down to crop. And that should remove everything outside of the selection. And like I've just mentioned, we're going to remove even more of the audio because this is still over 60 seconds long. It's about 1 minute and 5 seconds long. So let's make it even shorter than that. Somewhere around 30 seconds would be ideal. So let's find the point at which we want to trim out more content.
First thing that we try to provide is information, advice and guidance.
So at the very start of the file, the first phrase that Osher says is, the first thing that we try to provide is information, advice and guidance, which is in the first 4 seconds. Let's take a listen at those 4 seconds.
First thing that we try to provide is information, advice and guidance, really to...
So we're going to add another marker just after the word guidance. However, I want you to be very precise with where you're adding the marker for this particular exercise. So after the word guidance, Osher takes a breath in before his next phrase, and we can hear that pretty clearly. Let's play it again.
Information, advice and guidance.
So just before the next phrase, but after the breath, that's where I'd like you to add the marker. Because that breath is really important, because that breath will act like glue when we stitch the next piece of audio together with that first 4 seconds. So we're going to keep that first 4 seconds and then we're going to delete some more of the content here. Let's take another listen. Let's go to around 40 to 45 seconds.
While you're under contract. Importantly, we do offer...
So where Osher says the word importantly, that's where we're going to continue the soundbite with this selection. So roughly, all of this audio is what we're going to remove. Now, we need to be very precise again with our selections. So I'm going to zoom in around 40 to 45 seconds so we can clearly identify the shapes of the waveform. And I predict that this here is where we want the end of our selection to be. So this content here is the start of the next portion of the selection.
To start preparing while you're under contract.
Okay, listen to where Osher says start preparing under contract. He takes another breath in, which is kind of around this area. Now again, we need to make sure that our marker is on the right hand side of that breath, and then the next portion of the soundbite is on the right. So let's scrub through again.
Preparing while you're under contract.
So just there. So I'm going to add a second marker by pressing the letter M. There we've got the second marker. Now let's zoom out. So everything between these two markers we want to delete. So it's probably worthwhile us activating our skip selection once more. So let's activate skip selection. And you'll notice that the playhead is at the beginning of the selection. So when we press spacebar, it will play back the first 4 seconds and then jump straight over to the next portion. So let's listen carefully.
Information, advice and guidance. Importantly, we do offer...
And it's married those two sections up perfectly. And the reason that it's married up so well is the use of that breath at around 4 seconds. So that breath has essentially acted as the glue, like we said it would have done, between this section of the audio and this section of the audio. So that's been really useful. Now, we can delete this audio in the original way, like we did in the first few examples, by pressing backspace on the keyboard. So let's press backspace. And again, Audition doesn't leave the gap. It just leaves us with our overall soundbite. Let's take a listen to that transition once again from this portion of the clip to the next portion, and hopefully it should marry up very, very nicely.
First thing that we try to provide is information, advice and guidance. Importantly, we do offer...
Yeah, I'm very, very happy with that. So that sounds great. And instead of having a 60-second soundbite, which is quite long, we now have a 26-second soundbite from Osher. So very happy with that. In this lesson then, we've taken a quick look at top and tail audio editing, which is basically removing a portion of the audio file at the beginning and a portion of the file at the end, leaving us with our main substance or main content within the middle. Coming up next, we're going to take a look at fine-tune editing.